When someone becomes distant, the first reaction in most people is confusion. We begin to interpret space as loss, silence as rejection, and withdrawal as abandonment. But in truth, distance does not always mean disappearance. It is often the quiet phase of emotional processing, the unseen work of the heart and mind aligning themselves after waves of feeling have collided. When a man becomes distant, it may not be that he has stopped caring. It may be that he is trying to make sense of what he feels, something too deep, too heavy, or too complex to translate immediately into words. Human beings are energetic creatures. Every connection we form stirs something inside us: memories, fears, hopes, expectations. When emotions rise too quickly, they can overwhelm the mind. The masculine nature, in particular, is not always taught how to sit with emotional intensity. Many men are trained to analyze rather than feel, to solve rather than surrender. So when their inner world becomes crowded with emotions, the instinct is to step back, to retreat into solitude, not to abandon but to regulate. Distance becomes a form of recalibration, the mental and emotional act of organizing what the heart cannot yet explain. When someone withdraws, what they are often seeking is balance. It is not that they wish to disconnect, rather, they are protecting the connection from their own confusion. Imagine a lake after a storm. The surface remains unsettled for a while, but beneath it the water slowly finds its stillness again. In that stillness, clarity returns. This is how emotional distance works. It is the mind's attempt to calm the waters before speaking again, before reaching back out with understanding instead of impulsiveness. The challenge for those who remain on the other side of that distance is patience. The ego begins to create stories. It whispers, "They must not care." It adds weight to the silence, imagining meanings that may not exist. But not all silence is a wall. Sometimes it is a bridge being built in slow motion. Invisible at first, but designed to bring two people back into alignment when they are ready to meet again. The mistake we often make is to chase during someone's process, to demand answers while they are still searching within themselves for language. But the more we push, the further they retreat. It takes a deep form of understanding to recognize that space can serve love. To allow another person their distance without resentment is to understand that growth is not always synchronized. There are moments when one soul must pause while the other continues to move. There are moments when one must reflect while the other must simply wait. The heart that can hold love without control, that can remain still in uncertainty, possesses an inner strength that outlasts emotional turbulence. Distance becomes a mirror for both sides. The one who steps back learns to observe their emotions, to find clarity about what they truly feel. The one who stays learns detachment, learns to love without clutching. Each is being prepared for a deeper understanding of connection. Because the truth is, closeness without awareness often creates chaos. People collide without realizing the patterns that drive them. Distance, on the other hand, brings awareness. It is in silence that realization forms. A man who distances himself is often working through unspoken fears, fear of losing independence, fear of vulnerability, fear of not being enough. These are not rejections of love, they are echoes of conditioning. Many men associate emotional exposure with weakness, so when they begin to feel deeply, they instinctively pull back to regain composure. In his solitude, he may be questioning his capacity to provide, to protect, to remain strong while opening himself to love. His distance, therefore, becomes his internal dialogue, his way of meeting his own doubts before he can meet you fully. And yet, for the one waiting, this process can feel unbearable. The absence feels loud, the silence heavy. But within that space lies an invitation, not to chase him, but to meet yourself. Distance from another always exposes the distance we hold within ourselves. It reveals where we cling, where we depend, where we have built identity on someone else's presence. Instead of asking, why is he distant? Perhaps the question becomes, why does this distance unsettle me? In that reflection, you find your own processing taking place. To love consciously is to allow room for ebb and flow. The tides of intimacy cannot always rush forward. They must sometimes retreat to gather strength. When he withdraws, it does not mean he is gone. It means he is returning to his inner workshop, the place where he refines emotion into understanding. And when he reemerges, he does not return as the same man. He returns with a quieter strength, a more deliberate presence. It is easy to confuse stillness with apathy, silence with indifference. But a mind that processes is not idle. It is at work beneath the surface, rearranging thoughts, healing bruised emotions, recalibrating boundaries. The more we learn to trust that process, the less anxious we become about the pauses in connection. Just as night prepares the world for dawn, distance prepares the heart for deeper connection. Every meaningful bond requires breathing space. Without space, energy becomes congested, communication becomes reactive, and love becomes survival rather than flow. When distance arises, it signals that something within the dynamic needs to breathe. If both can respect that, the connection transforms. The silence becomes sacred rather than threatening, and love matures from emotional dependency into mutual respect. Distance, then, is not the end of connection, but a necessary rhythm within it. It is the unseen phase of emotional alignment, where both hearts are silently learning the language of balance, patience, and inner understanding. There is a quiet force within every man, an energy that does not shout for attention, that does not always explain itself, but rather moves inward when the world becomes too loud. This force is what we often call masculine energy, and it has its own rhythm, its own way of finding truth. While the feminine energy tends to express, connect, and feel through communication, the masculine seeks understanding through retreat. When faced with emotional complexity, it steps back, not to avoid but to see clearly, not to reject but to reflect. Solitude for the masculine spirit is not isolation, it is medicine. When a man becomes silent, many assume he is indifferent or detached. But silence for him often means thinking deeply, trying to regain order within himself. The masculine nature is oriented towards structure and direction. It cannot function in chaos for long. When emotion begins to rise, especially emotions that challenge his sense of control, he feels the need to withdraw into a private space where he can process without distraction. This is not emotional coldness, it is emotional organization. In solitude, he can examine his fears, his responsibilities, his desires, and his choices without the noise of external expectations. A man's solitude is where his clarity is born. In that space, he confronts questions he cannot yet articulate. What am I feeling? Why does this matter to me? What is my next step? These questions demand silence to be answered. The masculine mind does not find peace in immediate dialogue. It finds peace in inner resolution. That is why he often needs distance before he can express what he truly feels. Without solitude, his thoughts remain scattered, his emotions tangled, and so he steps back not as an escape but as a form of alignment. This retreat can confuse those who love him. The feminine energy by nature connects through togetherness. It heals through sharing, through conversation, through emotional presence. So when a man withdraws into his solitude, she feels the distance as disconnection. But for him, that distance is necessary to return whole. He is not avoiding love, he is protecting it from his own confusion. He knows that if he speaks before he understands, his words may harm more than they heal. His silence, then, is not indifference, it is responsibility. Throughout history, masculine energy has always needed solitude to access wisdom. Warriors went into the mountains before battle, sages sat in caves before teaching, leaders took long walks before making decisions. In these quiet spaces, they were not doing nothing. They were listening, not to others, but to the subtle voice within that only becomes audible when the noise outside fades. In modern times, this same pattern continues. A man who feels emotionally overwhelmed instinctively seeks solitude because it is the only space where he can hear himself again. Inside his solitude, a man reclaims his sense of direction. The masculine energy thrives on purpose. When emotion clouds that purpose, he feels lost, weak, unsteady. So he withdraws to rebuild his focus, to reconnect with what he stands for. He must find clarity before he can give clarity. Just as a mountain needs stillness to maintain its strength, the masculine needs silence to regain inner structure. His quiet moments are not empty, they are sacred meetings with his own consciousness. But solitude is not always peaceful. Often, it is uncomfortable. It forces him to face his insecurities, the fear of failure, the weight of expectation, the tension between who he is and who he wishes to be. Many men have learned to distract themselves from this discomfort, to escape into work, habits, or performance. But true solitude strips away all of that. It leaves him face to face with his essence. In that confrontation, real transformation begins. Only when he faces his inner chaos can he step forward with authentic calm. When a man chooses solitude consciously, he begins to understand that clarity is not something found outside of him, but something cultivated within. He learns to trust his intuition, to listen not just with his mind, but with his body. He begins to sense what aligns with his truth and what drains his strength. This self-awareness gives rise to confidence, not the loud confidence that demands attention, but the quiet confidence that moves with direction and grace. It is also in solitude that the masculine heart learns balance. Too much engagement with the outer world hardens him, makes him reactive, burdened, and guarded. If solitude softens that armor, it teaches him humility. It reminds him that strength is not domination, but centeredness. The man who understands solitude no longer seeks to prove himself through action alone. He carries his strength in stillness. He speaks less, but with intention. He moves slower, but with precision. He gives, but from fullness rather than depletion. When he returns from solitude, he is clearer. He knows what he values, what he can offer, and what he must protect. His presence becomes steady, his words deliberate. The same energy that once needed to withdraw now becomes capable of deep connection because it has been purified by silence. The masculine energy that seeks clarity through solitude becomes a grounding force, not just for himself, but for those around him. To misunderstand this need for solitude is to mistake process for distance. It is to take the inward journey as rejection. But in truth, every man who is emotionally aware must step into periods of withdrawal to sustain balance. Without that time alone, he loses the thread of his own truth. Solitude, then, is not a luxury for him. It is a requirement for his integrity. A man who has learned to value solitude no longer fears being alone. He realizes that in his own company, he meets the source of his strength. He finds peace in the silence that once felt heavy. He learns that clarity is not something he chases. It is something that arises when everything unnecessary falls away. And when that happens, he returns not just clearer, but more whole, more grounded, and more capable of love that is steady rather than impulsive. When emotions rise too high, when feelings begin to overflow beyond what the mind can hold, a natural reaction takes place, the instinct to protect oneself. Emotional overwhelm is not weakness. It is the moment when the inner world becomes too full, too chaotic, too heavy to manage. For many, and especially within the masculine nature, this overwhelm triggers withdrawal. It is not because they do not care, but because they care so much that they no longer know what to do with what they feel. The heart retreats not to hide, but to survive the storm that it cannot yet name. When someone becomes emotionally overwhelmed, their system begins to defend itself. The human psyche is designed to seek safety, and safety can look different for each person. For one, it might mean talking, crying, or expressing. For another, it might mean silence, distance, and retreat. The person who distances themselves is not always rejecting connection. They are defending their emotional boundaries from collapsing under pressure. When a man begins to feel emotions he does not understand, his instinct often is to step back, to build space between himself and the intensity he is experiencing. That distance becomes his temporary armor. The masculine heart especially has been conditioned to equate vulnerability with weakness. From a young age, many men are taught to suppress emotional expression, to stay composed even when their inner world trembles. So when they encounter deep emotional connection, love, fear of loss, or the sense of being truly seen, it can be unsettling. The walls that have protected them for years start to crack, and rather than letting them crumble, they instinctively reinforce them. Distance becomes the tool for regaining control. It is a defense mechanism born not from coldness but from unfamiliarity with emotional openness. In moments of emotional overwhelm, the nervous system enters a protective mode. It withdraws energy from connection and directs it towards self-regulation. The mind begins to analyze, the body tightens, the voice quiets, and communication fades. This is not intentional cruelty. It is emotional self-preservation. To someone on the outside, this may feel like rejection. To the person experiencing it, it feels like survival. The inner dialogue often sounds like, I just need space to think, or I can't deal with this right now. The distance created is their way of reducing emotional intensity so they can make sense of what's happening inside them. But this defense, while protective, also becomes a barrier. It stops the flow of emotional exchange and creates misunderstanding. The one waiting feels abandoned, while the one retreating feels misunderstood. Both are caught in the same emotional current. One trying to reach out, the other trying not to drown. This is why emotional overwhelm is such a delicate state. It demands awareness from both sides, compassion from the one who feels ignored, and courage from the one who withdraws. For the masculine energy, emotional intensity often threatens the sense of control. When he begins to feel deeply, he cannot solve it like a problem, he cannot plan it like a task. Feelings ask him to surrender, to sit in uncertainty, to face the chaos within. This is not easy for someone who has learned to define strength through stability. When love or attachment brings emotions that feel unpredictable, his mind begins to resist. He may start to think too much, analyze every word, or simply shut down communication altogether. This shutdown is not an act of dismissal. It is his system resetting itself. Emotional overwhelm can come from many sources: conflict, misunderstanding, fear of loss, or even the depth of affection itself. Sometimes the intensity of genuine connection makes him retreat. The closeness he feels begins to expose old wounds, memories of betrayal, fear of disappointment, or unhealed parts of himself. Instead of staying and confronting these emotions, he steps back to avoid reopening those old scars. His distance becomes the unconscious way of saying, "I'm not ready to feel this much." However, this defensive distance is not the end of connection. It is a pause, a sacred pause where the overwhelmed heart learns to breathe again. When he retreats, he is trying to regain emotional balance. Inside his silence, there is processing. He is trying to name them, the feelings that rise like waves inside him. He is testing his own limits, how much emotion he can carry without losing his center. It may take time, but with self-awareness, the distance eventually becomes a path back to understanding rather than a wall of avoidance. The one on the receiving end of this distance often feels powerless. They sense the energy change, the messages slow down, the warmth fade. But the truth is, chasing someone in emotional defense only reinforces their withdrawal. The more they feel pushed, the deeper they retreat. The only way to bridge that gap is through patience and calm presence. When you remain centered, you show them that their emotions are safe, that they can return when ready without judgment or demand. Emotional overwhelm also teaches a profound lesson about love and boundaries. It reminds both people that connection must allow breathing space. Too much emotional pressure, even when born from affection, can suffocate. Real intimacy is not about constant closeness. It is about creating a rhythm where both hearts can expand and contract naturally. The distance that comes after overwhelm is often the body's way of restoring that rhythm. If you could look inside a man's silence during this time, you would see confusion mixed with care. You would see a heart that feels deeply, but fears expressing it incorrectly. You would see a mind that is trying to translate feeling into thought and thought into clarity. His withdrawal is his way of protecting what he feels until he can express it without hurting or losing control. The beauty of understanding emotional overwhelm is realizing that distance does not mean disinterest. It is a signal that something meaningful is happening, something too powerful for the person to process all at once. The more intense the emotion, the stronger the defense. But behind every retreat, there is a heart trying to make sense of what it feels, a mind searching for peace, and a soul learning how to remain open in a world that has taught it to close. When a man begins to distance himself, when his energy feels unpredictable or withdrawn, the natural impulse is to react, to reach out, to ask questions, to fill the silence with words in an attempt to bring back what once felt secure. Yet what often goes unnoticed is that energy, not effort, determines the tone of connection. What you feel, he feels. What you project, he absorbs. The emotional current between two people is invisible, yet deeply powerful. And this is why stillness, your calm, grounded presence, becomes his mirror. Stillness is not passivity. It is not indifference or emotional numbness. It is a quiet strength that communicates self-trust. It says, I am centered in my own energy, even when you are not. When you remain still in the face of his distance, you are not ignoring him, you are reflecting back his internal state in a peaceful form. He is unsettled, uncertain, or overwhelmed, but your calm becomes the reminder of balance he has temporarily lost. In this way, your stillness acts as a mirror. It shows him what peace looks like when his own mind is in chaos. The masculine energy often learns through reflection, not instruction. Words can challenge his ego, but energy can awaken his awareness. When he feels your steadiness without blame or demand, something within him begins to recognize the contrast. He notices the difference between the noise inside him and the calm in front of him. Your stillness becomes a silent teacher, guiding him back toward emotional equilibrium. It tells him, without words, that he can return, not because you need him, but because peace still exists where he left it. Stillness carries power because it removes resistance. Most emotional dynamics between two people are driven by reaction. One withdraws, the other pursues. One feels fear, the other tries to control. This back and forth creates tension. But when you stop reacting, when you choose stillness instead of chasing, the pattern breaks. There is nothing for his defenses to fight against. The space between you becomes quiet enough for truth to rise to the surface. He begins to feel rather than resist. In that silence, he starts to notice what he truly misses, not the attention, but the energy of peace that only presence can create. Your stillness is not coldness. It is emotional maturity. It means you understand that everyone processes in their own rhythm. You do not rush his process, nor do you shrink yourself to win his attention. You remain open yet composed. When he looks toward you, even from a distance, he does not see anger or desperation, he sees calm consistency. That reflection often has a profound impact, because while chaos may feel familiar, peace feels safe, and a man who has learned to trust safety in another person's energy begins to soften his defenses. The feminine energy, in its most awakened form, does not chase, it anchors. It does not beg for attention, it draws attention naturally through its serenity. Your stillness is that anchoring force. It communicates, I am not here to control your path, but I am here whole within mine. That vibration reminds the masculine energy that he too can stand still without losing himself. In your calmness, he finds permission to slow down. In your composure, he finds the reflection of his own potential for peace. When you meet his distance with anxiety, he feels pressure. When you meet it with accusation, he feels shame. When you meet it with stillness, he feels clarity. This is the quiet alchemy of emotional energy. The more you hold peace within yourself, the more he begins to mirror it back. It might not happen immediately. His process may take time, but the vibration of your stillness begins to shift the emotional field between you. Without you saying a word, your energy speaks. It says, I am not your enemy. I am not your chaos. I am your reflection of calm. A stillness also reveals truth, not just his, but yours. When you no longer react to his distance, you begin to see what lives beneath your own emotions. You might discover the fear of being left, the desire to fix, the discomfort with uncertainty. Stillness gives you the space to observe these inner reactions without becoming them. In doing so, you grow stronger, more self-aware, more grounded in who you are rather than who someone else needs you to be. The peace you cultivate within yourself becomes unshakable. It no longer depends on his presence to exist, and this independence is precisely what the masculine energy respects most. The more you remain rooted in yourself, the more he feels drawn. Not because you are withholding love, but because you embody balance. You represent something he wants but struggles to maintain emotional stability. When his world feels uncertain, your calm energy stands like a lighthouse. It does not chase the ship. It simply shines steadily until the ship finds its way back. Your stillness is also an energetic boundary. It says, I am available for connection, but not for chaos. It teaches him, and you, that love cannot flourish in constant reaction. It needs pauses, it needs reflection, it needs space. When he feels that your energy does not collapse under his distance, he realizes that your love is not dependent on constant reassurance. That realization over time draws him closer. It allows him to relax into the connection rather than run from it. The mirror of stillness works because it transcends words. You cannot convince someone into emotional maturity, but you can embody it. You cannot force someone to open, but you can create an energy where openness feels safe. Your calm, your composure, your ability to sit in silence without fear, these are the signals his subconscious reads. They tell him that love is not control, that closeness is not suffocation, that vulnerability does not need to be rushed. The greatest transformation often happens not in moments of passion, but in moments of stillness. When you stop chasing, you start radiating. When you stop explaining, you start embodying. When you stop trying to be understood, you start becoming the understanding itself. And through that silent strength, you show him something his own chaos cannot provide, the peace of being met by someone who is not moved by fear, but guided by awareness. Your stillness becomes his mirror because it reflects not what he is, but what he could be. It shows him the serenity that exists beneath his confusion, the clarity beneath his noise, the calm beneath his defense. It does not force him to change, it invites him to remember who he is when he is not running from himself. In relationships, closeness often feels like safety. We crave constant reassurance, steady communication, visible effort. Yet, paradoxically, it is not always in closeness that truth is seen. Often, it is in space, the silence between two people, the pause between conversations, the distance between hearts, that real intention begins to show itself. Space is not emptiness, it is revelation. It strips away performance, testing whether connection is rooted in genuine care or temporary comfort. When space appears, what remains is what is real. When someone pulls back, the ego panics. It wants control, it wants certainty. The mind begins to create stories. They are losing interest. They must have found someone else. I did something wrong. But what if space is not punishment? What if it is a natural test of alignment? Every connection must breathe to survive. When the constant exchange pauses, both sides are given a mirror. One side will fill the silence with projection, the other with self-reflection. In that difference lies truth. Space does not destroy relationships. It reveals the strength of what has been built. For the masculine energy, space is often necessary. It is how clarity is restored. When a man steps back, he is not always retreating from love. Sometimes he is retreating from noise. He is seeking to understand what he feels beneath the surface, away from influence or emotional intensity. His actions during that space reveal his authenticity more than any promise spoken in closeness. Does he return with clarity or with confusion? Does he drift further away or move back with deliberate presence? That behavior is truth emerging without the mask of constant connection. For the feminine energy, space becomes an emotional test of self-trust. Can she remain grounded when attention is withdrawn? Can she stay connected to her own worth even when validation pauses? When she resists the urge to chase, she begins to see more clearly what energy she was actually connected to, the person or the pattern. Many times, it is not love that keeps us attached, but habit, familiarity, and the comfort of knowing someone is there. When space comes, those illusions start to dissolve. It becomes evident whether the connection was mutual or one-sided, whether it was built on genuine resonance or emotional dependency. Space strips away pretense. In constant closeness, people can hide behind roles, the nurturer, the provider, the attentive partner. But when distance appears, effort cannot be faked. Words no longer carry weight, only energy does. A person's true intention is seen in what they choose to maintain when no one is watching. If someone disappears into the silence without care, it reveals that their investment was conditional. If they use the space to grow, to understand, and to return with maturity, that shows depth. Space does not create character, it exposes it. The beauty of space is that it gives time for emotional clarity to surface. Without space, reactions dominate. People speak from defense, from fear, from urgency. In space, truth ripens slowly. The mind quiets, emotions settle, and perspective expands. What once felt confusing becomes simple. Either the connection continues to pull both souls forward, or it begins to fade naturally. Space allows the natural course of energy to unfold without force. In the spiritual sense, space is not separation. It is a sacred interval. The universe works through space. The pause between breaths sustains life. The silence between musical notes creates rhythm. In the same way, emotional space allows a relationship to find balance. Without it, the connection suffocates. Too much closeness too soon can blur individuality. When two people learn to respect the rhythm of closeness and distance, their bond matures. It becomes rooted in freedom, not control. Space also reveals what kind of love exists between two people. There is a love that fears absence, and there is a love that trusts it. The first one clings, the second one breathes. When someone can hold space without panic, it shows emotional maturity. It means their love is not built on possession, but on presence. They do not chase because they understand that what is meant for them will not require constant grasping. The more peaceful one becomes within the distance, the clearer the truth becomes. The one who truly values you will not use space to forget you, they will use it to remember you more clearly. They will reflect on the connection, on what it means, on how to nurture it with more intention. Their silence will not feel like neglect, but like recalibration. On the other hand, those whose intentions were shallow will fade quietly into that space. The distance becomes a filter through which only authenticity remains. What was temporary dissolves. What is real endures. It is in space that emotional dependence transforms into emotional awareness. You begin to see that your worth does not fluctuate with someone's attention. You stop trying to fill the silence and start listening to it. The silence speaks. It tells you where energy still flows and where it has stopped. It shows you whether you are holding on out of love or fear. And in that observation, something inside you grows strong. The ability to love without losing yourself. When two people are aligned in intention, space strengthens their connection. It gives them time to grow individually, to expand their understanding, to bring more awareness into the bond. They do not fear silence because they know it does not erase what is real. They use it as reflection, not rejection. But when intentions are unaligned, space makes it obvious. One continues to reach, the other continues to retreat. One grows calm, the other grows indifferent. Space clears confusion by showing contrast. Every meaningful relationship must pass through phases of space. These phases are not obstacles, but necessary transitions. They refine love from attachment into respect, from need into choice. They teach patience humility and trust. They reveal what words cannot. Whether someone's heart moves toward you freely or only when guided by comfort and convenience, the truth that emerges from space is often uncomfortable, yet it is pure. Because in space, there is no pretending, no performing, no pressure. Only the essence of what truly exists between two souls. There is a kind of love that does not rush. It does not chase, demand, or insist. It understands that timing is part of truth, that what is meant will not vanish when allowed to breathe. This kind of love holds space without clinging, offers care without control, and trusts that distance does not destroy what is genuine. Love that waits without chasing is not passive, it is powerful. It carries a quiet confidence that knows connection is not sustained by pursuit, but by presence. When love becomes chasing, it transforms into anxiety. The mind begins to count messages, to interpret silences, to measure affection like currency. But when love rests in waiting, it shifts from fear to faith. It becomes an act of trust, trust in the other person, trust in the timing, and trust in one's own emotional stability. Love that can wait teaches patience, and patience purifies attachment. It turns emotional urgency into spiritual maturity. Waiting without chasing does not mean doing nothing. It means doing the inner work while allowing the other person the space to do theirs. It is an active stillness. The heart continues to feel, but it no longer grasps. The energy remains open, but it no longer pulls. Instead of saying, "Come back to me now," it says, "I will be here in peace when the time is right." This attitude frees both souls. It removes pressure and creates room for clarity. Because when you stop chasing, you stop distorting the connection with fear. Love that waits becomes a mirror of emotional strength. It shows that your sense of fulfillment does not depend on another's presence. It shows that you have learned to anchor yourself in your own being. When you wait without chasing, you begin to understand that love cannot be demanded. It can only be invited. True love does not thrive in desperation, it thrives in freedom. Every time you resist the urge to control or to prove your worth, you reclaim your power. The masculine energy, when given space, begins to process. It needs time to find direction, to translate feeling into understanding. When the feminine energy learns to wait rather than chase, she gives the masculine the gift of clarity. Her stillness becomes an open field rather than a cage. He can return when ready, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. And when he does, the connection deepens because it has survived the test of distance without manipulation. Love that waits teaches him what trust feels like, what respect feels like, what emotional safety truly means. The feminine heart often wants to nurture, to close the gap, to soothe the silence. But there is a wisdom in restraint. When she learns to hold her energy rather than project it outward, something sacred happens. The connection transforms from pursuit to balance. Her patience begins to speak louder than her words. It tells him, "I trust you enough to let you breathe. I trust myself enough to stay calm. I trust love enough to unfold in its own time." That energy has gravity. It pulls without chasing. It influences without demanding. Love that waits also refines the one who waits. In the stillness, emotions surface, fear of loss, fear of abandonment, the ache of uncertainty. Each wave that rises becomes an opportunity for growth. To wait consciously is to face these inner storms without running from them. You begin to see how often you've mistaken attention for love or constant communication for connection. In the silence, you learn the difference between attachment and affection. You learn how to love without expecting, how to care without controlling, how to stay open without losing yourself. This waiting becomes a spiritual discipline. It trains the heart in detachment, not the cold detachment that refuses to feel, but the peaceful kind that allows feeling to exist without consuming you. It shows you that love is not a transaction but a vibration. You start to understand that true love does not fade when unspoken, it deepens in the quiet. It grows stronger in the absence of pressure. Waiting teaches surrender, and surrender brings wisdom. For the one who distances, love that waits offers healing. When they realize that they are not being chased, not being forced, they begin to relax. The absence of pursuit becomes the presence of peace. They no longer have to defend themselves from expectation, and this gives them space to reflect. They start to feel the energy of genuine care, one that wants nothing but understanding. That feeling pulls them back naturally, not through fear of losing you, but through the comfort of being seen without demand. When love waits, both souls evolve. One learns patience, the other learns responsibility. One learns to hold stillness, the other learns to approach with honesty. The dynamic shifts from fear-based connection to conscious connection. Love becomes less about filling emptiness and more about expanding awareness. Both begin to realize that love is not found in grasping but in growing. It is not a race toward togetherness. It is a journey toward mutual alignment. The power of waiting lies in its silence. In that silence, truth begins to reveal itself. If the connection is real, space strengthens it. If it is not, space dissolves it gently. Either way, waiting without chasing protects your energy. It keeps your heart open, but your dignity intact. You are no longer driven by the need to be chosen. You become the chooser of your own peace. In a world that glorifies urgency, to wait is an act of rebellion. It is choosing depth over distraction, authenticity over reaction. It is saying, I will not chase love because real love does not run. This choice builds spiritual endurance. It sharpens intuition. It allows the heart to breathe freely, trusting that what aligns with it will find its way back naturally. Love that waits without chasing becomes a bridge between two souls walking at different speeds. It gives time for the lessons to unfold, for emotions to mature, for intentions to purify. It is not the stillness of indifference, but the stillness of trust. The kind that holds the door open without standing in the doorway. The kind that knows that what is meant for both souls cannot be lost to time, silence, or distance.